I discovered that my girlfriend was pregnant by another man, and I decided to expose her affair to her family. Now, she's begging for forgiveness, but I've chosen to move on and let her deal with the consequences of her actions. At first glance, some might think I'm the bad guy here, but that's far from the truth. I've known since my early teens that I didn't want children. My parents were fine with my decision, though they thought I might change my mind later on. Since I wasn't their only child, they assumed they'd still get grandchildren from my siblings. By the time I turned 20, I made my decision permanent and got a vasectomy. 2 years later, at 22, I met my girlfriend, Katie. From the beginning of our relationship, I was upfront about my decision to remain child-free. I'm pretty sure I mentioned my vasectomy early on, though I can't be certain because there was some drinking involved, and I'm not sure she remembered. We'd been dating for about a year and a half when she moved in with me. I'm 25 now, and everything seemed fine until 2 weeks ago. I came home from work to find Katie standing in the living room with a huge smile on her face, holding a positive pregnancy test. At first, I thought it was one of those TikTok pranks, so I played along, but when she didn't reveal it as a joke, I knew what was really going on. I continued pretending, but inside, I was furious. That night, I started making plans. I sent out emails, took a week off work, and told my closest friends what happened, instructing them to act like they knew nothing but to be ready for what I had in mind. The next morning, I left the house as if I were heading to work, but instead, I met up with my friend Carl, who was ready to help me. We spent the entire week following Katie, and on the third day, we saw her meet up with the guy she had been seeing behind my back. We followed them to a motel, and Carl even tailed the guy back to his house. We found out he was married with kids. With that information, I put a plan in motion. I convinced Katie to visit her parents last Saturday to share the good news about her pregnancy. While we were there, my friends had access to my house. At her parents' place, we sat down for lunch, and Katie told her family she was pregnant. Everyone was thrilled, but I knew what was coming next. I pretended to receive a call and stepped out for a moment. It was my friends, letting me know everything was ready. I returned to the room and asked if I could make an announcement. I started by talking about how much Katie meant to me, and everyone in the room probably thought I was about to propose. Instead, I dropped the truth. I told them how it broke my heart when Katie cheated on me and got pregnant by someone else. The room fell completely silent. Katie looked shocked and insisted it wasn't a funny joke. I calmly told her I wasn't joking. I explained that I had a vasectomy 5 years ago and get checked every year, so there was no way the baby was mine. Right on cue, her phone started ringing. I told her to pick it up because it was probably the real father of her child. Sure enough, it was her affair partner, who was furious after my friends had just delivered all of Katie's belongings to his house. You see, while we were at her parents' place, my friends had packed up all of Katie's things into a U-Haul and driven them to the affair partner's house. They rang the doorbell and explained to him and his wife that Katie needed somewhere to stay, as I was kicking her out. They even handed over a folder full of photos of him and Katie together. The guy called Katie, screaming at her that she had ruined his life and that he never wanted to see her again. I couldn't help but comment, "So his wife isn't okay with his mistress moving in?" Katie was devastated. Her family was in shock, and I walked away knowing I had exposed the truth and could finally move on from the whole ordeal. She's been begging for forgiveness ever since, but I'm done. Now, she has to face the consequences of her actions on her own. After discovering Katie's betrayal, I made the difficult decision to leave her. I calmly explained that she would have to stay with her parents, and with that, I walked out, leaving her in tears. Her family, clearly confused and angry, tried to make sense of the situation. Meanwhile, my friends had arrived with a U-Haul loaded with her belongings, intending to drop everything off at her parents' place after the man she had been seeing refused to take it. I returned home where my sister was waiting for me. She already knew everything that had happened. This wasn't how I planned for things to unfold, but Carl, my best friend, had likely told her. He knew me so well and could sense the pain I was carrying. The moment I saw my sister, I broke down. The overwhelming grief, the feelings of betrayal. Everything I had tried to hold and came rushing out. She held me as I cried and stayed by my side the entire weekend, helping me navigate the deep emotional hurt I was experiencing. It has now been a week since I left Katie at her parents' house. My friends had cleared out everything that belonged to her from my place and delivered it to her family's home. However, they couldn't take everything since I hadn't labeled all of her stuff. As a result, some of my things were mistakenly taken, including my tablet, which contained important work files. I needed to get it back. To handle this, I called Katie's sister to arrange a time to swap our belongings. Her sister agreed but made a condition. I had to sit down and talk to Katie, giving her a chance to explain. I wasn't keen on the idea of seeing Katie again, especially since I had no intention of getting back together, but the need for my tablet left me with no choice. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet, but I made it clear from the start. There was absolutely no chance of reconciliation. When I met Katie, she looked completely different. It was as if she had become a hollow version of herself. She tried to ease into the conversation with small talk, but I wasn't interested. I immediately cut her off and told her to get to the point. She wanted to apologize, and it took every ounce of my self-control to keep calm. I wanted to scream at her, to let out all the anger and pain I was holding on to. How could she think that a simple apology could fix the devastation she caused? But I didn't yell. I kept my composure, staying silent in response to her apology, neither accepting it nor rejecting it. Katie then asked why I hadn't questioned why she did what she did. I told her bluntly that no excuse she gave would make what she did okay, so it didn't matter. She went on to explain that she genuinely thought the child she was carrying was mine, since we hadn't used protection. I was baffled by this, considering I had undergone a vasectomy and had yearly checkups to ensure it was still effective. She admitted she had hoped that if I found out she was pregnant, I would change my mind about not wanting children. I told her flat out that it was a ridiculous assumption and that it was clear she hadn't used protection with her affair partner. She then accused me of being unfair by exposing her affair to her family. I calmly responded that she was right. I didn't have to tell them, but I chose to, just as she chose to cheat on me, and just as her affair partner chose to cheat on his wife. These were the consequences of those choices. Katie then asked if there was still a chance for us if she had an abortion. I told her that her decision to keep or terminate the pregnancy was irrelevant to me. It didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me. She could do whatever she wanted with her body, but our relationship was over, and there was no going back. At that point, I had heard enough. There was nothing more she could say that I didn't already know. I stood up, gathered my things, and was about to leave when she said, "I love you." I turned to her and responded, "No, you don't. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me and hurt me the way you did. I loved you, but you destroyed that." With that, I walked out, hearing her sobs fade as I left. Since then, I've learned that her affair partner has been kicked out of his home, and he and his wife are getting a divorce. He ended things with Katie and blamed her for ruining his life. As for what Katie decides to do about the baby, that's her concern now. It's no longer my problem.